Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I am John Negroni, and I have a bit of a shake-up this week. I get to make a big old announcement. Will, are you ready for this?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be, I guess.
All right, so starting this past week, I started my first stint as the film editor for The Young Folks. That's theyoungfolks.com.
Congratulations.
So from now on, I will be saying that. I went from film critic for The Young Folks. I was kind of like one of their staff writers, and now it's super official. So
yeah,
there you go. Send me your pitches.
There you go.
My DMs on Twitter are open. If you have a movie feature or anything, you want to dip your hands into the cold sea of film writing, hit me up. Let me know what's on your mind. But yeah, some news there. Also, I'm the co-creator of Cinemaholics and film critic for Awards Watch and The Spool. I'll still be writing for those two publications pretty regularly because I love them and I still want to write about movies. I'll just be doing more like editing and stuff like that and like managing, and I actually have to like make decisions now, which is not going to be fun probably. But I will say it's the first week, maybe it's the first week, the honeymoon or whatever. I've been having a lot of fun with it. I'm not going to lie to you.
Sure.
It's been enjoyable.
I'm Will Ashton. I'm a writer.
I'll get to you eventually, but I want to keep talking about myself for at least 4 more minutes. No, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend and our other Cinemaholics co-creator. It's Will Ashton.
Hey.
You can find more episodes of Cinemaholics, including our full archive on cinemaholics.com, including written reviews and other bonus content. You can write into the show anytime by sending us an email. Our email, as always, is cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support this podcast, help us keep the fun going, you can head on over to patreon.com/cinemaholics. You can also support us non-financially. Just find us on Apple Podcasts and leave us a review if you can. We would super appreciate that. And we also have Cinemaholics merch you can purchase on our website, cinemaholics.com. So get yourself a hoodie, mug, t-shirt, shot glass, whatever you like. Links to all of that are in the show notes. I will say that I'm getting close to being ready for the new wave of merch since we have the new logo and everything. It's coming.
Oh, okay.
So your chances are about to dry up to get the classic logo on that stuff.
Yeah, get the retrograde stuff.
Yeah, I mean, eBay's probably going to have a field day.
Yeah.
With,
You'll
I'm sure that's going to happen.
The envy of all your peers if you have the retro stuff.
Whoa, that's the old logo. I haven't seen that in years.
The first edition. There you go.
All right. Well, this week on the show, we are going to be talking about yet another Fast and Furious movie, F9, the Fast Saga. We'll also talk about a new movie on Hulu called False Positive, kind of a horror film. And then we'll finish out the show with a Netflix movie starring Liam Neeson called The Ice Road. But first, the only thing I have for off topics this week, just a couple of quick things. There were some other films that I managed to catch this week. One of them, I hope we can do a bonus, actually, because I think it would be really fun to talk about this, especially with you, Will. But Werewolves Within came out this past weekend. My review for it will be coming out pretty soon on The Young Folks. And yeah, Werewolves Within, super fun movie. If you've ever played Werewolves, like the Mafia-style party game, have you ever played that game, Will, before, where you have to figure out who the werewolf is and a group of people?
Is it like the game Mafia?
Yeah, so it's like Mafia, but with werewolves.
Okay, I haven't played that version. I played Mafia on like buses and stuff. That's a fun game.
I played both versions. I remember playing Mafia like growing up and everything.
Yeah.
And then later in life, werewolves became the thing where instead of like Mafia members, it's like they're werewolves. One person's a werewolf and they're trying to like pick people off night after night. That game.
Mm-hmm.
It's an addicting game. It's an addicting party game. There's also a VR game from Ubisoft, which actually created or helped facilitate this movie. It's actually directed by Josh Rubin, who did Scare Me last year. I forget, did you see Scare Me eventually?
Yeah, we covered it on the show. Okay,
I remember seeing it at Sundance. I don't remember if you and I talked about it, so okay.
Yeah, we talked about it with Abby.
Yeah. This is his follow-up, and I remember I was kind of like whatever on Scare Me. I thought it was cool. I thought it was a really neat idea, but I didn't love it. Werewolves Within, though. Oh my gosh. I'm like, okay, this guy, I want to see more horror films from him that take place in like cabins in the winter, because he really made this game. It's like I was saying before, it's like a VR game too that they created. One of the better video game movies, probably, even though I don't think that's what people really know werewolves from, but it's a little bit of a cheat there.
Sure.
So yeah.
There you go.
Fun movie. Sam Richardson is in it. Milana Vaintrub. Really, really good cast. Michaela Watkins. Will, when you check this out, I think we need to talk about it for a while because I really want you to like it.
I do like Sam Richardson. I'm very excited for I Think You Should Leave season 2, which is coming out in a matter of weeks. So
yeah,
yeah,
he's in that. I mean, he's been in a bunch of stuff, but this is like him in like firmly a leading role, which sure. I appreciate for sure. I saw 2 other things this week. Will, I saw Carry You With Me. Were you hearing anything about this movie? This indie Spanish movie?
Not at all.
Okay. This is from the director Heidi Ewing. I think you've seen some of her docs, right? Like Jesus Camp.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw like One of Us, but this is her like first narrative film, and it's very good. I really enjoyed it. Carry You With Me. I did a review for this one as well. It's about 2 young men in I think it's like the late 90s, and about how one of them crosses the border. He's a chef, and he wants to become a chef, and he like faces like all the typical obstacles of being a homosexual and Mexican culture, and then coming to New York. And it's like a sprawling, epic, melodramatic love story. It's very good. And I definitely enjoyed it. It has a bit of a gut punch of an ending. So a little bit of a recommendation from me there. I do want to mention it just because I Carry You With Me and Werewolves Within were a couple of the best movies I saw this week. Unfortunately, we didn't both get a chance to see them. So just kind of covering that off real quick for the listeners, since, the rest of the week's offerings might be a little bit sparse.
Well, that's a great incentive to keep listening, but you have another film
hey,
you also
the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The last movie here, I did see Good on Paper, this Netflix movie with Eliza Schlesinger. It's like kind of like a sort of autobiographical story about this guy she dated once who was very surprising. I'll put it that way. Will, I forget, because I know you've heard about this movie, but are you a fan of Schlesinger's like comedy? Like, have you seen some of her specials?
I have not seen a single one of her specials, so I have no opinion about her comedy.
I've seen a couple of her specials. She's funny. I think she's a very funny comedian. I've liked her in some like films. I remember she was in Instant Family. She had a fun role in that.
She was in what's that movie called? She had a dramatic role last year. The Vanessa Shaw movie. Blanket. It was on Netflix. Piece of a Woman. She
was in Pieces of Woman. I totally forgot about that. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to mention, because I remember she was in Spencer Confidential.
Yeah.
That's what I thought you were talking about. I was like, wait.
Yeah.
Is that dramatic?
Right. Well, she was in that as well. I was going to mention that. But she's in a Netflix game, I guess. Those are 2 Netflix films, and this is also a Netflix film.
Yeah. And I know she's going to be in a documentary. I think it premiered at South by Southwest, but Hysterical. The like comedian documentary.
Oh yeah, that was the first day of the fest. I didn't see it, but I remember hearing about it. Yeah,
I heard it's good, and I heard it's worth checking out. But yeah, I gotta say, Good on Paper. I mean, we can make easy jokes about the name of the movie.
Sure.
It's just not very good. It's weird because like most of the movie you're watching it and you're like, okay, I understand the conflict and I understand what is going on here. Like 30 minutes before she does, at least, maybe more. And so it's kind of like, it all just sort of leads to nothing. It's a very strange movie. It's a movie that's missing a third act. Like, it's trying to become this movie about like female friendship too, which is sort of effective, but it was a bizarre movie. I was very like surprised by it.
It's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's supposed to be like an inversion of a romantic comedy, right? Where a woman falls out of love with a man, like that they have a meet cute, but then like as time goes on, she gets less and less enamored with him.
Right. Well, she learns certain things about him, and you're just sort of like, well, yeah, because like the audience is going to be way ahead of her. Because like, first of all, so the dude is played by Ryan Hansen, the wonderful Ryan Hansen. He's doing a great job here. But it's just so obvious that something's wrong with this dude. So it's very strange. It's like, I don't know. It has some interesting things to say about like how women are held to a different standard in terms of like giving men a chance, and there's a thread of that like comedic intelligence, the sort of thing that makes you laugh during a special that is certainly there. But then I think the movie just doesn't know what to do with that idea in a way that's like cinematic, because it just sort of fizzes out, and you're like, okay, like. Cool. Like, I don't know. It's a very, in terms of like the plot and like the structure of it, I was very surprised by it. I think it would have probably been, I guess, just a better special, but I don't know. I don't know what went wrong here.
Yeah, they can't all work. But she wrote it, right?
So yeah, she wrote it and stars in it, of course. It was directed by Kimmy Gatewood, who I think this is her first film. I think she's like probably kind of in like the Hollywood sort of, world. She's in so do you know Rebecca Johnson?
Sounds
She was in Glow.
Okay.
She's been in a bunch of stuff. I think she was on like an MTV show. So she and Kimmy Gatewood are like a comedy duo. That's kind of like in this. I think it's called the Apple Sisters, which I think is actually like 3 people.
Okay.
But yeah, I know her and Rebecca Johnson, or maybe there's a third person, I don't remember. But yeah, they're comedians basically, and so this was her first film. And yeah, there you go.
Well, I haven't seen this one.
Good on paper.
Yeah. But I'm sorry to hear it's not very good.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, it's on Netflix, so if you're curious about it, I guess you could always just give it a quick look-see if you're that curious. But let's talk about a film that you can actually see in movie theaters, and that is one of the most anticipated films of last year and this year, because it was supposed to come out last year, and it was delayed, of course, here. It actually was delayed multiple times, but let's talk about it. F9.
It was supposed to come out like just when the pandemic started, right? It was going to come out that April.
Was it?
I think April. It was like the last weekend of April, I think, like just before the summer movie season was about to start, if I recall. Because that's typically when these movies come out, is like around, like a little bit after spring, but before the official start of the summer movie season.
I mean, if it's not April, I'd say May. I do not remember when it was supposed to come out. I don't know, because I'm thinking like if it was April, it would have been like the very end of April, probably like the last week of it. That's my guess.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so it's like,
okay,
like traditionally in the before times, Marvel had dominated that first week of May. So I know
and they pushed things a little bit though, right? With I think it was the second, or I think it was Endgame. They did April 27th.
Well, that's the thing.
Like, shoot.
Right. Well, they copied the Fast and Furious model, which is like coming out just before the summer movie season started, or like I guess technically pushing it back because
I don't remember any of the. I mean, maybe my memory is just failing. I don't remember any of them coming out in April. I always thought they came out in May. I'm a little confused.
I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I always thought they opened up like just before May. I thought that was
probably
like,
right.
I thought that was like their traditional opening date. Or actually, you know what? Maybe like maybe just the one movie in the Fast Furious saga opened in like April-ish, and then the other ones opened in May. But I can't speak for sure. Maybe I'm just thinking of Furious 7. I'm not sure.
Either way, it doesn't super matter, I guess. I mean, yeah. So these movies we've kind of alluded to, obviously. F9.
The world has a way of changing. And we change too. I know some people, they would die for me. There are moments that separate us. They're my family. But we always come back together. We heard y'all needed a little love out here. Y'all ever thought about the wild missions we've been on? We've taken out planes, trains, tanks. I'm not going to even think about the submarine. And now we got cars flying in the air? Who is he?
Jacob is Dom's brother.
Been a long time, Dom. Little brother.
You always say never turn your back on family. But you turned your back on me.
Or F9, the Fast Saga, also known as Fast and Furious 9, which is like, I don't know, I think it has all kinds of names. The titling structure of these movies has never been consistent, but this is the latest film directed by Justin Lin. Justin Lin also did The Story with Daniel Casey. And Justin Lin, too, I mean, well known for basically saving the entire Fast and Furious franchise. Kind of came in with, I believe the first one was Tokyo Drift, and then he made some of the best ones. I mean, he did Fast 5, he did Fast and Furious 6, whichever that one was called. And it really turned this sort of like franchise that was kind of a street racing, like summer movie that had sort of petered out over the early 2000s, turned it into what it is today, which is like a $1 billion action franchise with Vin Diesel firmly at the center of it, and then a bunch of other complementary actors. And this is the 9th installment of the Fast and Furious movies. I think so there's 10 now overall if you include Hobbs and Shaw. And I think it was actually originally going to come out a little earlier than 2020, right? Because Hobbs and Shaw, I think, was delayed, and then I think Hobbs and Shaw happened, right? And then so they had to move this one.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah, because initially they weren't going to even do Hobbs and Shaw. It was just because The Rock was feuding with Vin Diesel. They were just like, all right, well, we'll keep you in the quote unquote family, but you're just going to have this like side adventure. And then we'll have Vin have his own movie, and hopefully that you two can patch things up before these next two movies we're gonna do. But we'll see what happens there.
Sure. Yeah. I remember 2019. I talked about Hobbs and Shaw with Pretty Gibber, and then you weren't there, so we haven't talked about Hobbs and Shaw really together before. You saw it though eventually, right?
Yeah, awful movie. I hate it.
Really?
I think it's terrible.
Wow. I thought it was really
easily
fun.
the worst. Easily the worst in the franchise for me.
I could not disagree more. All right. But I know some people just really dislike it for whatever reason. I think it's pretty. Well, I thought it was pretty fun.
I mean, I can't speak for anyone else but myself, but in my opinion, the reason why the most recent Fast and Furious movies work is that they're able to kind of capture that like childlike mindset of like everything's just like, what if we could do this? Like, what if we can just get bigger and badder as possible, which I appreciate. But I think what makes it work, the secret sauce, is that Vin Diesel is fully committed to the absurdity of these movies. Like, they're utterly ridiculous at their face value, and I don't think they have any preconceptions otherwise, but Vin Diesel emotionally cares about Dom, cares about all these other characters, both as an actor, as a producer, and I think that's what really kind of keeps the glue together. Hobbs and Shaw.
That's where I disagree. I think that's the biggest issue with these movies is Vin Diesel. The thing that keeps dragging them down for me, I think I would love them if it wasn't for how seriously Vin Diesel takes these movies in a way that just does not match like what we're seeing on screen. It just rings so pretentious to me.
Sure. Well, it is pretentious, but in a way that I find kind of bemusing, I guess. But I kind of agree with you with this one, but I don't want to jump ahead. But with Hobbs and Shaw, that whole movie to me is just like a dick measuring contest where it's just like, can Vin Diesel do this? Can Vin Diesel do this? And it's just like, it's just so soulless to me. It just like all of the Rock's movies recently, they're just all like business decisions now. Like just him being like, what if we did this? And it's just all like calculating numbers, and it's not without any of the heart or passion that's in the other movies, in my opinion. That's the reason why it's just an awful, unbearable experience, that it just makes the franchise soulless.
Those are all the reasons that I think keep it from being like an amazing movie, sure. But I think the movie still as like an action comedy is really strong just because you have The Rock and you have Jason Statham and you have Vanessa Kirby just sort of being like interacting with each other and doing all these awesome set pieces. And yeah, it's a popcorn feature. It doesn't have heart, it doesn't have soul. It's not trying to really. I mean, it sort of tries to insert that stuff, but I'll take a Rock summer blockbuster over a film that is just sort of like all the way up its own tailpipe in terms of its like really annoying messaging about again, we'll get into it, but I know we also talked about Fate of the Furious on this show before. That was the first Fast and Furious one we talked about.
That's is that one of our first like 10 episodes?
I don't know if it was the first 10. It was 2017, right?
Early.
It was pretty early.
Yeah, it was early.
Pretty early in some Holics days.
Yeah. It's like first 20, I know for sure.
Something like that. Yeah, because I mean, it's early in the year. But yeah, Fate of the Furious, I have to tell you, like, I remember really enjoying that one for the most part. But like, I try to look back and like try to remember things that happened in that movie. And the only thing that really sticks out is Jason Statham and the baby scene, honestly. I remember there was like this whole thing about Vin Diesel being like, you know, he's betraying the family. And Charlize Theron's the bad person. She has dreads. That's all I basically remember.
Yeah, well, I remember some key scenes from that film. I do understand that movie is not particularly well received compared to the others. Like, I feel like that's the one for some people where the crack started to show, at least post Fast 5. But I don't know. I have only seen it the one time, so maybe if I revisit it later down the road, I'll see the issues that people have with it. But I feel like that movie blended the absurdity with, like I said, the emotional kind of like over gravitas pretty well. Like, it's definitely a sloppy movie, but I do really remember like the over the top prison fight scene where like The Rock basically just like rips a wall out. And there's like the like car tornado scene that I think is delightfully just absurd. And I'm like, this is what I want from like a Fast and Furious movie. It's just like utterly ludicrous stuff that like is its own weird plane of existence. Like, that's fine. And I feel like the other movies since then haven't quite cracked that code in the same way.
I mean, look, they have a tough job, the Fast and Furious movies. They are competing with superhero movies, right? They have to do these things that are absolutely insane. That's why in Hobbs and Shaw, you have Idris Elba calling himself Black Superman, and they hype that in the trailer because they're like, we get it. We know this isn't Marvel, but it's pretty cool though, right? Like they're like super spies. You'll watch this, right?
Well, that's a weird thing is that I feel like with both Fast 9 or F9 and Hobbs and Shaw, we're getting to this weird like memified era of the Fast and Furious franchise where it's like they're becoming more and more self-aware. Like with this movie, literally like Tyrese is commenting like on the fact that they like are invincible and can't die and all this stuff, and it does things without giving away that like, you know, they're like aware of like what fans or people on Twitter are saying about these movies. And I feel like that was becoming apparent with Hobbs and Shaw as well. I guess you could argue with Fate of the Furious as well, but like they're kind of like feeding into the fans' indulgences in a way that sometimes works, sometimes I think is really fun, but it's also kind of becoming, I don't know, a little annoying for me at the same time.
They really cracked a good code though with Furious 7. I think the 7th one and then Fast 5. I mean, those ones, top of the heap. Yeah. And I'll tell you, look, I was rewatching the Fast and the Furious, right? And I also checked out Too Fast, Too Furious. And both are movies I've only seen once. I've only seen those movies. I think, I've never seen any of these movies more than once. So it actually is kind of amazing that I remember as much as I do about these movies, to be totally honest with you. Maybe it's because I always have flashbacks.
Yeah. I think the only one that I find to be forgettable is Fast and Furious, the 4th one. That's just the one that doesn't stick in my brain at all for whatever reason.
We were talking about that before the show, and I was going to mention, because I haven't rewatched that one, but compared to like, I remember I saw Tokyo Drift in the theater, right? I was 15, I think. And I remember tons about that movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember the type of car he drives in the final race. I remember Lucas Black and Bow Wow, their whole dynamic. I remember the love interest. I remember Han's death scene. Like, I remember a ton about that movie.
Very tragic.
Yeah, but it'll never get reversed. But then, the first two movies, I remember like the plot of the first one. I remember, like, again, that's another movie. I didn't see that one in theaters. Tokyo Drift is the first one I saw in theaters, but I saw it on DVD. And I remember the first movie is like, okay, Brian's an undercover cop and he has the hots for Mia, and Dom's kind of a hard ass, but maybe they're friends, and, will they find out? I don't remember the set pieces. I didn't remember the dialogue really. Mm-hmm. And in rewatching the first Fast and Furious, not a great movie. Like,
it's fine.
Maybe for 2001, but it was kind of boring to me. I don't know.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's that like the first movie, that's just basically a Point Break knockoff. I don't even think they have any reservation about it. They're just basically doing Point Break
with race cars. There are a few narrative touches. Like it's not a one for one, but it's like the same story, but with some differing things with the plot. It's there's a little bit more going on under the hood, I guess.
Sure.
But what's boring about that movie to me is like the races are fun, the set pieces are cool, but like Paul Walker, let's just say his performance gets way better in the second movie. Sure. And the first movie, I find him very odd. And Jordana Brewster as Mia, barely a presence in the movie besides eye candy. And then I think the best thing about the movie, and I think why the first one was so successful, is Vin Diesel. Because you're like, what is this guy's deal? And like the mystique around him is so fascinating.
And I would say Michelle Rodriguez to some extent as well.
I was going to mention her too, yeah.
Her very obvious star presence in even that first movie, I think, is very apparent.
There's a reason they're like now the two top build of the franchise, right? Like they're at the top of the like main movies.
Weirdly, they have less and less chemistry, I feel like, as the movies go on, but maybe that's just me.
That's just marriage. We'll find out about that. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm just saying that like I feel like Vin Diesel legit had more chemistry with Helen Mirren in this movie than Michelle Rodriguez, and I don't honestly blame him because Helen Mirren, she's
it's Helen Mirren. I mean, she's a catch, but I think a lot of that has to do with like he and Michelle have become such good friends that like it's so platonic, in real life. And I think that's what comes through. They don't try to make it super romantic in the movies anymore. And, I'm fine with that because, like,
but But there was a point, like, in this movie where I'm like, is he gonna sleep with Helen Mirren?
You're like writing down notes of like, is this movie gonna get bumped up a letter grade?
I mean, you gotta save something for the sequel, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. It will be like a flashback of like, whose baby is this really? But I will say, Will, the Fast and the Furious for me did not hold up, but Too Fast, Too Furious, and I know there's been a bit of a movement online for this movie's like rehabilitation. People being like, hey, I know we all make fun of Too Fast, Too Furious, the title of it, the fact that it doesn't have Vin Diesel, people just sort of write it off. But it's actually like, I've been rewatching it. It's more fun than the first movie. It's way better directed. John Singleton, of course, had that one. And I like Paul Walker a lot in it. I really like Roman Pierce, Tyrese Gibson in that first movie that he appears in. Also Ludacris. I mean, obviously it's so absurd to watch that movie right after F9 to see what becomes of like those two dudes. But I kind of really dig Too Fast, Too Furious. It's actually like really, it's just an exciting movie. I'm baffled.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that was a movie that kind of cracked the code as far as like, these movies should just be Hot Wheels movies. You know what I mean? Like they should just be like giant $100 million Hot Wheel movies. Like what a kid imagines when he's like on his carpet, like putting the two cars together, like vroom vroom. Like that's basically what these movies are, or what they should be. And I think that's the first one that really kind of captured that over the top absurdity of like what a child's perception of a giant car movie should be, in a good way. Like I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah.
In the first movie,
that's totally right.
I think that's kind of like where people stand on these movies, like because I know a lot of people are like, why don't they do the street racing anymore and stuff like that? And I think that comes from nostalgia for the first movie, which I can kind of understand. But at the same time, like you said, I think that's just more nostalgia playing an influence on that first movie, because there are like some really fun race scenes in that movie, but those are few and far between compared to the sequels, I guess. So
sure,
yeah.
Well, and you know what? They find like little moments here and there to weave in racing, in all of the sequels. There's always at least like one, and either through flashback or like there's a fun little opening thing. They did it in F9, right? So we've filibustered quite a bit, kind of reminiscing about Fast and Furious, but I think this has been a very helpful conversation for, let's say, paving the way for our review of F9, the Fast Saga. So as we kind of already sort of introduced, yes, Justin Lin is in this movie. He's made some of the best ones. And there's going to be, they already confirmed there's going to be a 10th film. It's probably going to be like FX or something like that. I don't know.
And a 11th film I think they're filming at the same time.
Has it been confirmed for 11th too? I didn't even hear about that.
The plan, according to Vin Diesel, is to make 2 movies filmed back to back. Okay,
sure.
And end the saga. Yeah. Okay,
all right. Well, I have to say, after watching this movie, I think that they're really about to run out of juice here. I'm like, so the story here, if you can say it's a story, is that Dom had a long lost brother this whole time, in the last 20 years. Never brought him up. He's estranged. Don't ask any questions. But the whole plot is that his brother, who played as an adult by John Cena, because they have to bring in John Cena, do they look alike? No. Are they the same ethnicity? Not even close. That's fine. That's what these movies have become at this point. But they have like all these flashbacks in F9, kind of like throughout the movie, that sort of show that Dom and Jacob, when they were younger, they actually show what happened to Dom's dad. It's something that's mentioned in the first Fast and Furious movie, and they actually they stuck to it. Like they didn't really retcon that much there. Like watching the Fast and the Furious, I totally forgot this, but yeah, Dom sort of recites what happened to his dad and like the race, and then what he did with the wrench. Like it's all there. And they do that in this movie to sort of explain, well, what happened to his brother. His brother was there. Why have we never seen or heard from him? And we now cut to the present day, and Dom is brought back from retirement by the crew, the family. We have Roman Pierce back here. We have Tej. We have Letty, of course. We have Ramsey, played by Natalie Emmanuel. and they let him know that something has gone wrong with a bunch of the people from previous movies. All that, it doesn't matter. They got to go on another mission. They do a bunch of stuff you see in the trailer, but then Jacob shows up, played by John Cena, does some crazy tricks. It looks like he is in the spy game as well. He's like a super evil spy. We have Cypher, who was played by Charlize Theron, back in this movie. We have a whole new set of evil villains, a thing that they have to get, and a lot of car action, a lot of nonsense, basically. But the heart of this movie is that Dom and Jacob, Dom has his found family, right? Plus or minus Jordana Brewster, who does come back in this movie. But, can he sort of reach out to his brother? Can they call bygones bygones? Can they figure this whole thing out? That's the whole point of this movie. It's a bit long. It is about 2 hours and 20 minutes or something like that, almost 2.5 hours. And it's a big old budget movie. It was supposed to come out last year, finally coming out now. It's already crushing the box office. It's Fast and Furious. What else do you need to know? Will Ashton, did you like F9?
Yes and no, I guess. As I was saying before, when I was watching Hobbs and Shaw, I found myself longing for the emotional sincerity of the previous Fast and Furious films, or at least the last few sequels, in that I really appreciate how they're very tongue-in-cheek, very absurd, but they tend to have their heart in their sleeve and are fairly unabashed about that. I didn't like how cynical the Hobbs and Shaw movie was, so I was like, please return us to that emotional sincerity. With Justin Lin back, I was like, all right, finally, we're going to do that. And I think to some extent it does. Like, I found myself smiling at a lot of scenes. There are at least 3 sequences here that I feel like are just pure Fast and Furious fun. They have the big over the top bombast that you want from the franchise. Everyone's committed to the bit, all that stuff. But I also feel like this is where the threads are really starting to pop in terms of indulging, as you were suggesting before, Vin Diesel's ego and pretensions, I guess, for what this franchise should be, and more importantly, what his character should be in this franchise. And I guess where I'm torn is that, like, I do like some of the stuff with Dom's character. I actually really enjoy the opening kind of Days of Thunder-esque flashback sequences. I really appreciate that he didn't. I appreciate that he didn't do a de-aging thing with him. They actually hired a young actor that, he doesn't look a lot like Vin Diesel, but enough to where I can believe it. I think those scenes are heightened, but they're not overly heightened in a way that I think it's easy to appreciate them. Michael Rooker is also in those scenes, and I think he's actually a lot of fun in this, and I hope he comes back for future installments. They can bring him back. But I also just found as the movie went along... They can bring
him back. They have the technology.
Yeah. But I found that as they kept focusing on Dom, the movies tend to slow down to the point of being weirdly kind of dull. In that Dom's story, as you're suggesting, there's definitely some thought put into it, but it's also just it seems to be more grounded than this franchise really needs to be, and they come in stark contrast to what's otherwise a traditional Fast and Furious movies with the over-top action sequences, all the crazy, ridiculous stunts. But it just feels like this movie is weighed down by this desire to be more emotionally earnest. In some ways, like I said, it works. In other ways, I just feel like it makes this way more tedious than a Fast and Furious movie needs to be. And so I find myself ultimately of two minds on this film. I don't think it's an awful film by any means. I think Justin Lin's a very competent action director. It's nice to have him back. I do like supporting cast again as well. As we mentioned, Ludacris and Tyrese I think are often fun. I also enjoy, as I said, Helen Mirren and Michael Rooker as additions. Well, actually, I think Helen Mirren was in the Fate of the Furious, so her coming back is fun. But otherwise, I don't know. I just found myself weirdly sort of apathetic about this one compared to my warm enthusiasm for most of the recent Fast and Furious movies, and that I don't think it's doing anything completely wrong, but it just feels like, as you're suggesting, the juice is starting to wear out a little bit. It just feels like we've done this already. And even John Cena, who I think is a good addition to the cast as far as feeling of a piece with it, I found his character to be oddly kind of dull as well. I never really found his character super investing or interesting to warrant the slow, dramatic, over-the-top soap opera scenes that they have with him. I just found it to be weirdly kind of a disjointed film in that regard. Like, it's just like, some of it works, some of it's completely fun. All the magnet stuff, I love magnet stuff in movies, so with that, the Helen Mirren scene is fantastic. All that stuff, like, the small stuff works. I just feel like the broad, big picture stuff is just weirdly very mediocre, and so I find myself, like I say, sort of mixed on this film overall.
Yeah, I'm pretty mixed as well. I mean, the thing I enjoy about this movie is that they I don't know, the characters, they exist in this like action figure world. You know, they feel like collectibles, right? Where they show up in different movies.
Yeah, the Hot Wheels scene.
Just like, it's like Hot Wheels meets a G.I. Joe, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because that's like that's the fun at this point. It's like when I was in the theater, this was like a press screening, right? These are film critics. These aren't like, you know, the biggest fans of the franchise coming out. People were cheering at this movie. When like a certain character from previous movies who we thought we'd never see again shows up, people lost their minds, you know? And
that was great. I'm happy to see him as well.
I'm happy to see him, but look, and it's spoiled by the trailer, but look, it doesn't make sense. It feels totally like fan service, and I think they actually kind of botched the reveal. The trailer did a better job. I watched the trailer after this because I hadn't seen it going in, and I watched the way the trailer handled it, the editing of it, the slow, like the reveal of it and everything. I was like, whoa, that's effective. In the movie, it's just sort of like, all right, when are you going to show him? All right, let's get it felt like, let's get this over with to me.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So I was a little peeved by that. I mean, it's such a long movie too, and his addition feels so shoehorned. It feels so insincere, and that's what these movies have to be sincere to work. They're all B movies. We're not expecting them to be these like high art pieces of work. They're just supposed to be summer escapist movies, and that's what this one is ultimately to an extent. It's just one of the lesser ones, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree and disagree with your comment about the sincerity of the film, quote unquote, and that I do think emotionally it is trying to be sincere. I feel like at the same time, though, comically, or at least tonally, it is somewhat insincere, and that, as I was mentioning before, it seems to be kind of like chasing a meme at this point, like a lot of movies are, basically.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I can't jibe with the sincerity. It's so manufactured at this point. I just see all of the nuts and bolts behind what they're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I felt about the Hobbs and Shaw as well. And I guess some people felt that way about Fate of the Furious, but I wasn't there with them. But I feel like these last two, like the first three films, say what you will about them, they're very early 2000s race action movies, whatever. The fourth one's kind of that bridge, as we were mentioning before, and then the unofficial trilogy after that was like, they're very self-aware, but not like overly self-aware. Like they're heightened and absurd, and they're aware of what the fans want, but they don't feel like they're like being fueled entirely by the fans' expectations. And I think like that's why those like Fast 5, Fast and Furious 6, and Furious 7 are basically the best of the franchise, more or less, because they seem to have like the right idea. They got it cranked to the right degree, and now we're kind of like oversaturated at this point with like Fate of the Furious and this one and Hobbs and Shaw, where it's just like now it's like too much indulging the fans' expectations to the point where it's like, yeah, it just feels like we're kind of like, you know, like the big wave where we're like turning it to this degree and like looking at the audience and make sure we got their approval and stuff. And like I said, some of that stuff is fun, but it also just feels like it does weigh the film down because it's just playing to expectations more than it's doing like what this franchise should be doing, at least in my opinion.
I looked it up because I was very curious, like the release dates of all these things, right? So the first three movies all come out in June, which basically is, you know, that's what I assumed was the case, right?
Yeah.
Then almost every film comes out in April from then on. So you were totally right. Yeah. So April, except for this one and Fast and Furious 6. This one and Fast and Furious 6 came out in May. Mm-hmm. And I guess, to what you're saying, like some of them came out like early April. And I guess I just had it in my mind that they wrote out the whole summer, but clearly not.
No, but they have returning business. Sort of. They are summer movies. They're like pre-summer, basically.
They're there for like 11 weeks, you know, they're doing like full runs, and especially in summers that probably weren't, you know, the biggest summers in movie history. I'm thinking of, you know, like actually 2013, if you're looking at Fast and Furious 6, I think that one, like, I don't remember the summer 2013 being super impressive, but I could be forgetting something. But anyway, looking at this franchise, there are still things here that certainly like work. Right. I think the set pieces, you've kind of mentioned them. They're still engaging. They're still fun. I like that these movies don't care about physics. I like that they're still using like practical effects, and there are still moments in these movies where I'm like, how did they do that? You know, all that stuff is really cool. To what you're saying, I think that like it gets a little bit it goes a bit too far at times. And I think there's this whole thing where we're supposed to believe that Vin Diesel can take John Cena in a fight. And it's stuff like that where I'm like, okay, I'm okay with absurdity. But at some point, like the vanity of these movies is just becoming a bit much. And I think the vanity of like especially these male actors who are like, am I throwing enough punches? Do I look tough enough? Am I getting the better? Like we see that with The Rock. We see that with Vin Diesel. That to me is where it loses me on like the sincerity of it. Because these movies are all trying to be like, like let's hang out, let's drink some Coronas and have a good time. But really it's like, it's kind of like what you were saying for Hobbs and Shaw. It's a dick measuring contest. That's in this one, I think even more so than ever. And I'm just sort of like, why is Dom such a like rubbery, like he kind of compares himself to God at some point. It's just getting annoying. Like I'm annoyed by this guy at this point. And I like Vin Diesel. I love Vin Diesel. I think he seems like such a cool dude. I would hang out with him. I wish nothing but success for him. But there's just something about these movies, these just rubbing me the wrong way.
I do agree with you, but I think with Vin Diesel, he's a complicated dude because like he started out like doing serious stuff. Like he was in like Saving Private Ryan and things like that. Eventually at one point he did like a Sidney Lumet movie.
He made some seriously smart decisions early in his career, including with Fast and the Furious.
But now, he's like in this weird like boyish franchise thing that he's been doing for like 10, maybe 15 years at this point. Close to 20, I guess, if you count the early like Fast and Furious movies and Triple X. But like it's at this point, all these movies are basically indulging his ego, his influence, all that stuff, which I agree with you, gets tedious after a point, especially in this movie. I feel like it really weighs it down in certain key scenes. But at the same time, that's why I kind of admire about this, because like that's basically what the Fast and Furious movies are, because he's like the glue that's keeping it together, especially, considering, unfortunately, Paul Walker's not here, and he was initially like one half the franchise. So it is like basically his franchise at this point by that extension alone. But yeah, I mean, I do agree with you that it gets frustrating after a point, especially with this movie, because it does feel like it is kind of stroking his ego in the same way that Hobbs and Shaw was stroking The Rock's ego. And it's just like, oh, like, don't worry about what The Rock is saying. You're big, you're tough, you can take these guys, don't worry about it. And sometimes I think it's really fun. Like, there's like a scene here where he takes on, like, I want to say like 15 henchmen, all single-handedly in like a Bane style, where he like basically like almost rips some
straight
dudes
out
apart.
Of Dark Knight Rises. It like, literally does the back-breaking thing.
I think that's great. I think that's where the ego stuff is fun, in my opinion.
That's fun, and that's for the same reason I don't mind it with The Rock, right? I don't mind that in Hobbs and Shaw. He literally has people like characters being like, "You're like Kevin Hart," I think it was. She's like, "You're huge. Whoa, you have so many muscles." It's like it works because like. Yeah, I mean, it's The Rock. Like, eliciting that reaction from Kevin, it's fun. It's fun. With Vin Diesel, it's fun too. The problem is, we're 9 movies in. There's just no progression at this point. Yeah. And it's like you keep doing the same movie over and over again. And like the last time one of these movies had progression that had like, I think some of that just emotion that felt like it was going somewhere, it was changing the characters, the world was being impacted by their actions in a way that wasn't just some MacGuffin doing a thing, was Furious 7. Because I think in that movie, they're dealing, of course, with the fallout of Paul Walker's death and moving on with the franchise, but still like staying true to what was great about the franchise and what Brian, the character, brought to it, and then respecting Paul Walker. All that stuff really works. But I think ever since then, they've been spinning their wheels trying to recapture that same feeling. But they're doing it at the expense of writing the characters well. I think it's really telling, by the way, I forgot to mention this, that like this is the first movie in a long time. I don't remember the last time Chris Morgan didn't do the screenplay. This is Justin Lin with Daniel Casey. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't have Gary Scott Thompson here at this. I mean, he's been gone for a while, but like, these are some of the people who really carved out, they don't get a lot of the credit, but they really carved out the characters, the lore, and some of the basic story beats that I think are what made Fast 5 like fondly remembered. Like I think most people look at Fast Five as the best of these by a mile. So I think all of that's kind of missing from here at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Chris Morgan, I don't know him well beyond his work, so I apologize if I speak out of turn, but I think he kind of indulges the like childlike adolescent aspirations of the series. I think I really admire. Like, I don't think he's an amazing screenwriter. I don't think he's a very good dialogue writer, to be blunt. But I think in terms of crafting the franchise, I think he also kind of got what made these movies special. But I think a lot about, there's a video The Onion used to do where like they have an interview with Chris Morgan, and it's like coming after I think Wanted or something, and they reveal that he's like a 7-year-old boy. And it's just like, cars go vroom vroom, and it's just like, and it's like, yeah, I mean, like, I think that's kind of true to some extent based on his work, but at the same time I feel like I'm saying, like, I think that's kind of the appeal of these movies, is that like they do have like an almost adolescent perspective of things, especially when it comes to physics and gravity, in a way that I think that's where they're at their best in some respects. I do kind of miss the groundedness of the racing in the first early films, like at least in like Tokyo Drift, but I acknowledge that the franchise has moved beyond that. They don't really want to do that anymore. They have to kind of heighten things. So could I say though, Will, I mean, rewatching those movies, those races are not super grounded. The effects in them and the absurdity of the NOS and all that stuff, it's still, there's always been that layer of silliness. I guess I'm thinking more of like Tokyo Drift, where it's like they are ridiculous and absurd, but they do, like in Tokyo Drift, they look like real cars that are racing on the road, as opposed to like CG that's probably green screen stuff. Yeah. The green screen stuff with the first two movies is wonderful, though. And like, look, I can't emphasize this enough. Most people watching this are gonna have a good old time. You're gonna have a blast. You're gonna sit there in your seat. You're gonna eat your popcorn, and you are gonna be pumping your fist. This is one of the funnier ones, actually. I think Hobbs and Shaw was pretty funny. That's a big reason why I give that one such a pass. But this movie, I was laughing quite a bit, and I think I was laughing with the movie, sometimes laughing at. But I will say, the Roman has this like thing in here, this like invincibility sort of thing. You kind of commented on it a little bit, but it does have a really good payoff. There's a line that he has in this movie that like I had a genuine chuckle, and I was just like, yeah, that's where I like these movies. This is the zone for these movies for me. Yeah, I was kind of mixed in the comedy with this one. I didn't like the comedy at all in Hobbs and Shaw, but that's me. Comedy is subjective. Yeah, with this one, I think, like you're saying, like I think the self-awareness of the comedy, I guess, goes two ways. Like I really appreciate the like visual comedy of this, like the like set pieces, all the stuff like I said with the magnets, I found to be hilarious and fun. But yeah, I don't know, the jokes themselves, the way they're written, I don't know, they're very on the nose in a way that sometimes I found kind of amusing and fun, but then sometimes felt was kind of worn out and a little bit obvious. But yeah, I don't think it like hurt the movie more or less than anything else that we've been talking about. I like this movie okay. But I'm just sort of, I gave it a C+, and it's a high C+. I mean, I really don't want people to think that it's like trash and that it's like, oh, then I shouldn't watch this. Like if you're like the biggest fan, you know, like you don't need me to tell you, you're going to go see this. If you've already been a little skeptical with these movies for a while, like if Fate of the Furious did not work for you, if Hobbs and Shaw didn't work for you, you may be better off just, you know, unless you want to go to the theater. You know, if you want the theater experience, if you've been shut in for a while, you haven't come out to see like Quiet Place yet, or In the Heights, or something that's really like big screen approved, this is definitely a great entry point. And it's a bit long, but you know, you're going to get what you paid for. You're getting your ticket price. You're not getting cheated in that sense. And I don't think anything competes with these movies via the big screen. I can't imagine seeing the first two films on the big screen. I think they're the only ones I didn't see that way. And it's a bit of a shame, you know, because I think that really is like half of the secret sauce, I guess, as you were alluding to. So sure. C+ from me. I'm a little disappointed, but it's fine. It's Fast and Furious. I didn't go in with the highest expectations anyway. But what about you? Yeah, I'm pretty much there with you. I think the movie is pretty appropriately titled as Fine, if you pronounce it, I guess. I don't know if for a while I thought that was the actual title, was supposed to be Fine, but I guess it's F9. But yeah, I mean, I did ultimately find myself similar to you, pretty underwhelmed by this. Not in the sense I was like, oh man, this sucks, it's awful. It's just more just like, Yeah, it just kind of felt like more of the same at this point. I guess I had too many expectations with Justin Lin and Vin Diesel coming back, taking the franchise again, taking the keys, as it were, back to the franchise. But yeah, it's not awful as you're suggesting. I think maybe if I rewatched it later down the road, I would have more appreciation for it. Maybe I'd be more critical of Fate of the Furious in the way that some people are. But for me, I just found it to be a fairly underwhelming effort. So I'll give it a high C+ as well.
All right. Well, that is F9, the Fast Saga. It is now playing in theaters, I think, everywhere at this point. It's definitely playing in the US. I think it was already playing internationally. It's already made $405 million worldwide, which is definitely pretty impressive. I think it made $70 million domestically in the opening weekend. We are recording this on the Sunday. So yeah, it's looking like movie theaters are coming back in a big way, and that is definitely good news for fans of this franchise. I don't think we have to worry about seeing another one of these films coming out in the next couple of years. But yeah, check it out. It is I shouldn't say only, it is 145 minutes long. Let's talk about our next film here. So False Positive is a movie on Hulu. It's a horror film. Kind of like so I said in my review, it's not really like straight up horror. It's like psychological thriller with like horror elements, I guess. A lot of people comparing False Positive to Rosemary's Baby, saying it's Rosemary's Baby, but kind of updated for 2020, 2021, that kind of thing, right?
Very deliberate in that respect, but yes.
Totally. That's what they're trying to do. Yeah. They're wearing it on their sleeve, for sure.
Yeah, but not like a remake or a reboot or anything like that.
It's not a remake. Yeah. So like, Rosemary's Baby, it's like the neighbors and everything. This movie is very different from that whole plot. But I mean, the basic vibe of it is kind of calling on, it's like paying homage a bit. So this premiered at Tribeca just last week. Hulu has already released it. It was directed by John Lee. And John Lee, who you might recognize that name, he did a few episodes of Broad City with this film's star and co-screenwriter Ilana Glazer. They both did the screenplay together. The film also stars Justin Theroux, Pierce Brosnan, Sophia Bush, a few more folks. And the plot of it, I should also mention this is A24, has the rights to this movie. So the plot of it here, it's a lean movie. It's about an hour and a half, and we have this young woman who is married, and she's on the verge of having it all. Great career, loving husband, but she's kind of feeling like, that something's missing. They've been trying to have a kid, but they're having fertility issues. So her husband, played by Justin Theroux, tells her, well, look, he's a surgeon. So he's like, the guy who taught me in medical school, he's this amazing fertility doctor. So they go to him, and he actually may have a solution. And it looks like their dreams are coming true. It looks like they're actually going to have kids, not just one kid, but maybe more than one, because of the IVF that they're doing, or IVF, I should say. So she's pregnant. And then things start to go a little strange. She starts to suspect that the circumstances behind her pregnancy, and perhaps there's a little bit of gaslighting going on. Perhaps there are some unseen methods of what is going on with her pregnancy in general that she can't quite seem to understand. And that's kind of this movie. I don't want to say anything else. It's very eerie. It's a little bit Stepford Wives, and it sort of opens with a shot that's kind of promising something bloodier and splashier, but that's not the majority of this movie by any means. And first thing I'll say about this movie, the two things I like about it the most, I love Ilana Glazer in this movie. She's so good. She's so expressive. She's so I just empathize and totally understand what she wants, why she wants it. And I was always on her side, always trying to figure out what was going on right alongside of her. And I think she's really effective in this. And I think Pierce Brosnan as this sort of like shady, shadowy fertility doctor, really, really fun performance. It's not an ultimately amazing movie. I think that it's just kind of like, it probably could have been a short film, honestly, because there's a lot of padding that it has. And I was kind of just waiting for it to get to the good stuff. When it got to the good stuff, I was certainly impressed. And it had a final shot that will not leave my memory anytime soon. That is 100% for sure. But what about you, Will Ashton? What did you think about False Positive? Are you positive or negative?
I think overall I'm positive on it. I did have some expectations for this going in, just because I did enjoy what I've seen of Broad City. I haven't watched more than a handful of episodes, I'll admit, but I do know that Ilana Glazer at like the prime of the show's fame was like hyped up to be like this big comedy star. I think there was I think something happened with the show where it seemed to kind of get like maybe oversaturated in the public's view to the point where I feel like people kind of got annoyed with it after a while. I don't know if that's true to say, but one thing that really I found admirable about her career is that like this project was announced like basically I think like a month after Broad City ended. It was just like her immediate follow-up project, in a way that it felt like, okay, this is going to be a very clear departure from what we expect from her, like the like Yaz Queen persona, where it's definitely like everything about her character in this movie is deliberately like the opposite of Ilana from Broad City. Like her hair is straightened, she's very business oriented, she's like very collected, very like aware of like what she wants, very goal driven and stuff like that. And I do appreciate this project, both as you're suggesting as a star and writer, as a like clear departure for her, like exploring like something that's very clear to her, like in her voice, but also doing something that stylistically is a lot different. Same with John Lee, who in addition to working on Broad City, as you mentioned, is one of the co-creators of Wonder Chosen, which is a show that I don't know how it holds up nowadays, but I think it's a very inspired, clever show that it definitely, I think, hits its targets very well when it's good. And what I find admirable about the film from their creative perspective is that, Broad City and Wonder Chosen are very, like, energetic, like, let's see how broad and big we can get with these concepts kind of shows. And this project, in comparison, is very restrained, like, very, honed in terms of, like, how it's handling style and tone and mood, at least for, like, the first hour, 70 minutes or so, in a way that I found pretty admirable. But at the same time, I do agree with you that I think it does feel very at peace with its influences. Like, it does feel like it's hard to not think about Rosemary's Baby, obviously, but also like very much it owns a lot of easy comparisons to like Ari Aster's recent films, even having the same cinematographer, who I think does a really nice job in this film. I think cinematography wise, it's some of the best aspects of it. But also, I mean, obviously, like some of Jordan Peele's recent efforts, both as a filmmaker and as a producer, this film tends to follow his influence, and in a way that something I've noticed about movies that have been inspired by his works is that they tend to focus more, I think, on the concept than maybe the characters, and in terms of like developing like what the idea is. But I feel like with this movie, I understood what it's doing. I think a lot of it's very thoughtful in its approach, but I also feel like I never fully got an understanding of who these characters were beyond like the basic logline. And I felt like that's what held it back, as you're suggesting, is that like it plays out in a sort of predictable fashion, like especially if you have seen Rosemary's Baby, like you know where this is gonna go. It's more just the dread of waiting for that moment or that stuff to happen. And I think that's fine, but I feel like what I find frustrating about the film is that like I feel like it's kind of caught between where it's like it is very execution focused. It's very heavily focused on, like I said, delivering the tone and mood and style and that sense of dread. But it does hint at like some meatier, like social commentary in terms of like gender expectations and just general manipulation, like you said, gaslighting. But it doesn't feel like it ever like fully pushes the social commentary in a way that I felt like could have made this a little bit more meaty, a little bit more like thoughtfully produced in a way that I found could be like more to like wrestle with, I guess. I think in terms of like how it's executed and how it plays out, I think it's generally pretty well done. I found myself intrigued by it throughout, but by the end, I did kind of find myself wishing it was just like maybe a little bit better than ultimately was. But at the same time, I don't think it's like bad or poorly made.
Yeah. I enjoyed it for the most part too. I think we're basically on the same page. What excites me is just like, I like the idea of Ilana Glazer coming back to movies, and we haven't seen her in a film since Rough Night. That was years and years ago, and she wasn't, she was not top billed or anything. She was like one of the supporting characters.
Yeah, the best friend.
That wasn't a great movie. Yeah, she was one of the side characters for sure. And I'm really excited. Have you heard about the new show that she's in, the After Party?
No.
So there's a show coming to Apple TV Plus, and it was announced last year. And I think it's like 8 episodes, and it could be coming toward the end of this year. She's in it. Also in this movie, I think top builder Tiffany Haddish, Sam Richardson, actually, Zoe Chow, Ben Schwartz, Ike Barinholtz. I think Dave Franco is in it too. Sure. And this is Lord and Miller. They're the showrunners. Because they were going to make, this was years and years ago, they were going to make a comedy about like a high school reunion, like back in like 2013 or something. And then Sony was going to make a movie with it. But yeah, I think like it just kind of got messed up, but then it turned into this, which is called The After Party, which is a show.
Okay.
And so I'm stoked about it. I think that has the makings of being like, they've already finished filming it too. So I think that's going to be coming out like possibly later this year.
Okay.
But like, I just say that, because I'm optimistic about Glazer's career. I think she has so much untapped potential. I see so much of it in this movie. So I feel more kind to it than negative, because I think that it does take some risks. I think that, comparing it to Rosemary's Baby, you can certainly give it a little bit of like slack, like, all right, it's not super original and it doesn't have like the best like middle section. And I think the dread of it is okay. I think the body horror of it is really fun.
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't use fun, but I do think it's very effective.
Fun, if there's a better word for it, sure, I guess.
It's like unnerving, like not having autonomy over your body is just inherently very, very scary, at least to me. And I think this movie is very good about that stuff. Right.
It's pretty preachy about, like they kind of hit the nail on the head pretty often about like, this is a movie about female agency. This is a movie like, that's the stuff that it really wants to get across from Rosemary's Baby, of like a woman not having control of her body and then taking that to its extreme. To me, that's pretty, successful in doing that sort of thing. I think the production value of it is just not super competent. And I think that's what it comes down to.
I kind of disagree, I feel like, because I really like how appropriately sterile the like doctor's environment is. Like, it doesn't feel like out of place, but it feels...
It's lazy though, because it's hyping too many other movies. That's why I'm just sort of like, it doesn't have an identity of its own.
That's the root of my issue with it. But I don't think that's a fault of the production design, in my opinion.
I think it is. I think that they're just trying to like capture the same mood from those movies. And that's where it goes from like homage to just sort of being like, maybe competent's not the right word, but just like, individualistic or unique or just doing its own thing,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like one issue I do have with the movie is that at times, like, if it wasn't produced by A24, I feel like it's a movie that's trying to be an A24 film in a way that, like, I kind of mean it as a criticism, even though I do like or even love a lot of the A24 movies. It feels like it's trying to be reminiscent of a lot of other horror movies, like I said, including Ari Aster's films and Jordan Peele's films, in a way that I feel like you said, like, I think that robs the movie of some of its individuality in a way that, in some ways is impossible, because, like, obviously it is supposed to be commenting on Rosemary's Baby and stuff. Like, the comparisons there are unavoidable, but also, like I said, like, it just doesn't have quite of its own style and tone to really, I feel like, sink in deeper than it could, given the subject matter.
I gotta say, I never really, like, I keep forgetting that it's A24. It just doesn't have that same like level of craft. Like, I don't know, like, when I think of, like, A24 horror, I'm thinking of stuff like Hereditary and Midsommar, Ari Aster, I guess.
Same cinematographer as those films. So, and I think the cinematography, like I said, I think is really good for the most part. I think there are a lot of creative shots here. Like, I love all the, like, dual mirror stuff. Like, I think that's really cool. I like all, like, the upside down stuff.
Yeah, I want to give credit to Pavel Pogorelski. I can never pronounce his last name, Pogorelski.
Sure, I didn't even try.
I think that I'm conflicted because, like, I agree and I disagree. I think parts of this movie are where I'm like, oh yeah, that is the same guy, right? That's the guy who gave us, the cliffside sequence in Midsommar, But I don't know, something about this movie, I guess because I keep just thinking about what happens in the middle of it. So much is just like some really boring staging to me. Like, it's just very, I don't know.
But do you think that's the directing, though?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. That's why I'm kind of like, I feel a little bit all over the place. I don't know if it's just, to me though, I think that like the shooting of it isn't that interesting. And I don't know if that's because the director or like the screenplay just doesn't have a lot of interesting moments to speak of. It's a lot of just Ilana Glazer, being like suspicious of everybody in her life. And it's just like a sequence of scenes that I'm just like, it's the same point being made over and over again.
Right.
And I don't know. I just, until you get to the final act, that's where I think that the direction of it and the cinematography of it are interesting, and although I'll say there's like a little bit of a fight sequence that I was like, fine. It wasn't that interesting.
Yeah. I guess I was accrediting that more to the direction, given that like John Lee comes from a primarily TV background, obviously a lot of like comedy sitcom stuff, that the staging in those scenes, because like you're saying, like in the middle it's a lot of like people sitting down and talking to each other, and those scenes aren't particularly inventive or unique in terms of their visual approach, but there are some scenes in there that I think are visually very creative. Like there's like a scene where it's like half lit in like shadow and half lit like with like the like mirror and like the wall, where it's like I don't know like what I can really say without giving anything away, but I feel like the visual approach of it, and I credit this to cinematography, is like pretty cool, or it's like eerie in the right way that's trying to be eerie. And I mean, I don't think it's like A+. I don't think it's on par with his Ari Aster stuff, but you can tell, in my opinion, that this is a very smart, creative, competent cinematographer involved. And I think his influence definitely pushes this up in a way that helps to avoid general mediocrity.
I mean, the things that I like about it, I guess, are like some of the writing is fun, or at least like some of the writing is clever. And I like certain things of like the way she's gaslit, like how repetition is used in this movie to be like the whole mommy brain thing.
Yeah, I was
like,
about to say,
they find really unique ways to get that stuff across. I mean, when it feels like a TV show, it's fine. Like it's a bit of like a TV movie struggling to be an A24 horror movie in a way. Not disparaging TV movies, but just in terms of like low budget kind of, low stakes that kind of thing.
I kind of got like a Tales from the Crypt vibe, sort of, almost at times. Like a more toned down Tales from the Crypt at times.
I could see that.
But like, yeah, like it's not like Twilight Zone-ish. It's almost, but not really. But it's like, it's not as heightened as like a Tales from the Crypt. So like somewhere in between, I guess.
Yeah, ultimately I came out of this liking it more than I didn't. I'm a B-. I think that what's good about it is so good that it kind of overshadows some of my biggest disappointments, as we've already kind of said. And this movie does get a lot of credit from me for just the boldness of its ending, and just a lot of like, I do think that it makes its point. It's not like this movie is confused about what it is, or it's not like this movie it's just a little bit too long for what it is. And I think that it makes its point a little bit too often, but I think the whole point of the movie is good, and Glazer is good. It's a good performance, and I think that she has a good impact on the story. It's just, the predictability, I think, is what keeps this from being better than it should have been. I think that too many people are going to see what's going on here, and I think we didn't mention it too much, but some of the editing felt a little off to me as well. And I guess that does kind of go in with like the pacing of it, of just like never quite feeling like it's moving at a consistent energy. So just a B- from me, but a respectable B-. I'm glad I saw it.
Yeah, I guess I'm about there. Like I'm like a low B- on it, and I agree that like I don't mind the length. I think it's appropriately like 90 something minutes. I just kind of wish it was a little bit meatier, like you said. Like if it is going to follow a somewhat familiar template, have a little bit more like thematic depth. I feel like I think it has a lot to say, but I just feel like it takes a lot of like kind of simple routes to get there, and like you say, it gets kind of repetitive after a point because it's so focused on its execution and its concept that I feel like the characters end up a bit lacking or a bit like two-dimensional by accident. So I think it's like kind of frustrating because like it feels like it's almost on the verge of being like good, maybe even like very good. And as it is right now, I think it's like decent to fine. Like I said, I think I appreciate what it's doing. There is a shot near the end. It's not the final shot, but there is one near the end that I think is really good in a way. I'm like, well, where's this movie been? Like, why isn't the movie like on this level throughout? Because it's like this, like if it was like this throughout, it'd be like amazing. But as it is, I think it's fine. Like I like you said, I think I'm glad I saw it. I admire Ilana Glazer for doing something that's like very different than Broad City in a way that I think is effective. But at the same time, I feel like it's missing a few key ingredients to really make this thing pop.
Yeah, I think, I kind of mentioned it, the thriller aspect. I think that's what I wanted more of. I wanted it to have more like suspense, more tension, to break things up a bit. There's just not a lot of that at all. Another movie I was kind of thinking of actually after seeing this was Run, the other Hulu film we talked about earlier this year, where I think like what makes that film like engaging throughout is some of the tension, some of the like, how is she going to get out of this? This movie doesn't really have a lot of that stuff. It really is just sort of like, this scene happens and this scene happens. You get a little information here, a little information here. It just doesn't have any of that fun, like, the thrill of the chase, like that kind of stuff. And yeah, I guess for me, it drags it down a bit, but glad we still both kind of enjoyed it to a point.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more of Horror Squirrel from last year, because that's another film that's like a comedian kind of doing like a thriller, almost a horror movie with a director. It's not traditionally a horror filmmaker, and having like in that film, it's kind of going for like almost like something kind of more like surrealist, I guess. And with this, like it kind of verges on that towards the end in a way that feels almost sort of abrupt. But I feel like they have kind of like similar strengths and similar weaknesses at the same time.
All right, well, that is False Positive. You can watch it right now on Hulu. It is just 92 minutes long. All right, our last film for the week here. Let's talk about The Ice Road. Now, this is an action thriller. It's written and directed by Jonathan Hensley, who we've seen a lot of his stuff, that's for sure. He's been a screenwriter for a lot of things. You've definitely heard about it, if not seen. His first film he directed was The Punisher, the 2004 one. He wrote the film Jumanji, I think Die Hard with a Vengeance, right? And also Armageddon. Yeah. I mean, this guy's been around. He's been around quite a while. This new movie is on Netflix. It stars Liam Neeson, Lawrence Fishburne, Benjamin Walker, Amber Midthunder, Holt McElhaney. It's okay. I wanted to mention this too. It's Netflix, right? But it's also coming out via Amazon Prime Video in the UK. So for UK listeners, we're going to mention Netflix a bunch, but you can see this on Amazon Prime. So just pointing that out. And it's being distributed by Netflix, but it's being produced by like a bunch of other like companies. I think some like Canadian companies, maybe like I forget which ones, but it's an interesting duck of a movie. It takes place in Manitoba, which is in Canada, of course. And I think this movie really wants to like be a 90s movie or early 2000s movie. Well, I know when you were watching the movie, that was like one of the first things you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has that sort of template. I mean, it's kind of coming to us in the same like with the same energy of something like Those Who Wish Me Dead, kind of like hearkening back to a different time. I really like the tagline of this movie. I mean, it's a terrible tagline, but I like the audacity of it. This mission is on thin ice.
Oh yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
but yeah, you had expectations for this?
Expectations, maybe not the word I would use, but I don't know. I do have a soft spot for these late period Liam Neeson movies. I wasn't particularly fond of the Taken movies, but I do appreciate that like some of the stuff he did in the Taken movies' wake have been like I think people expected him to kind of fall into like the Charles Bronson phase, which I guess he's kind of getting to at this point where it's just
I was going to say, didn't he?
I mean, to some extent, yes, and I think some extent, no. Like he's somewhere in between like Charles Bronson and Clint Eastwood, where like some of his movies, like A Walk Among the Tombstones, The Grey, like they are action centric, but they are also like thoughtful and like kind of moody almost. Like they have like some clear like emotional weight to them. Like I feel like given Liam Neeson's personal tragedies about 10 years ago, that like a lot of his movies have this kind of like searching, soulful quality to them that I think in the right property can be very effective or like kind of haunting almost, and they can elevate what could otherwise be like kind of like like airplane novel fodder into something that's like a little bit more subdued, I guess, or something that has a little bit more to say. And the opposite end of that is something like Nonstop or The Commuter and stuff, where it's I forget that guy, the French filmmaker dude that's doing Jungle Cruise, John something. It's like I forget his name off the top of my head, but like his movies, they're just
all
like
the director of The Commuter.
Yeah, and he also did Nonstop, and I think he did Unknown.
I think his name is like I can't pronounce his name because he's French.
Sure.
Jamais, I want to say
something like that. But like his movies, those ones are just like, look, this movie is like dumb as shit. We're just gonna have fun and be really goofy, and like everything is just like absurd, and like they're obviously like B movies, but like they have a lot of cheese added to them, and it's just like, okay, like if he's like one or the other, I think Liam Neeson late period stuff can be kind of fun or at least interesting. When we're getting into this phase of his career, like we're like directly in like the C grade bargain bin era with like Honest Thief and The Marksman, and now this, where it's just like this one is probably his most like direct to video-esque type film, where it's a very, very simple plot, very much a star vehicle for him with like very like horrendously bad CG, like, you know, very hammy acting and stuff like that, deliberately so, but nevertheless, like definitely playing, like you say, to like a almost like red box kind of audience, where it's just like something that you can kind of like prop your feet up, not really like there's like stakes and it's like heavy, but it's not like overly stressful or anything. Like you can kind of relax with a beer after like a tough day at work and watch like this type of thing. And I think when the movie is indulging that, I think it's fun. Or when it's like getting to like
hold on. I haven't even set up the movie yet.
Okay, sorry.
Hold on.
Sorry.
Going all the way to your final grade. Before we talk about the movie, I just want to mention one thing to what you're saying, which I agree with. I mean, I like the first Taken movie a lot. I don't know if we agree there, but I think there are only two movies that he's like been either a main character, maybe like secondary main character, that kind of thing, in the last several years that I really enjoyed, and that's Silence, right? With,
that's great.
Scorsese, yeah, fantastic film, and Widows. You know, he doesn't have a major presence in that movie, but I think that he's really good in it. I mean, I was going to say Ballad of Buster Scruggs as well, but I mean, again, it's like kind of a smaller role, you know?
Yeah.
Other than those films, I'm just, there's not much to be said about, for me at least, with like Neeson's career. It's just very bit, you know, at this point. I know he's going to be in a Guy Pearce film later, either this year or next year. So you might be into that, right?
Oh boy, I'm surprised my siren didn't go off for that one. But
and I'm more excited about he's in another movie with Martin Campbell as director, and you know how I feel about Martin Campbell, directing my favorite film of all time. So you know,
did they do another one with Martin Campbell recently, or am I just making a movie up on top of my head right now?
There's another Martin Campbell movie that I just saw a trailer for, and I'm really hoping it's going to be fantastic, like one of the best movies of all time, and that is The Protege. Have you seen that trailer? It has Michael Keaton, Samuel L. Jackson.
Ooh, no, I don't think I have. But that Michael Keaton, huh?
I saw it in I don't remember what trailer. I think it might have been for Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, and I saw that, and I hadn't heard about the movie, but this is supposed to be coming out from Lionsgate in August. Okay. And I don't know if that's like the best sign for this movie being good, but I'm into it. I'll watch it.
Well, August is kind of I don't know, like anything could come out. Like one of the best movies of the year could come out in August. One of the worst movies of the year could come out in August. Who knows? So that's not a sign or a mark of good or bad quality. But I can see what you mean. Yeah, it's a question mark, but definitely an intriguing one. But yeah,
for sure. But yeah, so The Ice Road. Let's talk about this movie. Sorry to cut you off earlier, but let's set this one up. So The Ice Road is it starts off, you know, kind of similar to some other films you've seen, where like this group of miners gets trapped in this Canadian province, right? And there's a time limit. They have to survive. They only have I think 30 hours or something like that before they run out of oxygen, but also they're under permafrost, so like they're you know, it's not looking great. There's a time limit. The only thing that can get them out of the mine are these very big, cumbersome things called wellheads. And the only way to get them to this mining facility is by taking this perilous ice road. And at this point in the movie, I'm like, sure. Yeah. I buy it. I buy the stakes. I buy the limitations that this movie is setting upon me. I'm not even going to think about other solutions. You got me, movie. I'm just going to assume this is it. This is the only way they can save these miners, is with these very big things, and the fact that they have to drive across an ice road in April, which is very dangerous. And I don't know, Will, have you ever seen Ice Road Truckers?
The show?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a couple episodes.
I was thinking about that a lot because that's the first. That show is what introduced me to even the idea of like what ice roads are and everything. Sure. So I was stoked. I was like, "Oh, cool!" You know, like a dramatized or more dramatized version of how perilous the ice roads can be, but with these stakes and with a time limit. And there's also some like maybe other things going on that could get in their way. Who knows? And it's all you kind of see it coming.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Liam Neeson is an ice road trucker. For sure. He and his brother, Gertie, played by Benjamin Walker, they are kind of just, or sorry, not Benjamin Walker. Benjamin Walker plays the insurance guy. I don't remember.
Lincoln, Vampire Hunter dude.
Yeah, I think is it Marcus Thomas who plays his brother? I think that's who I might be thinking of. Yeah, Marcus Thomas. But he's a veteran. He suffers from a condition called aphasia. I don't know if suffers is the right word, but he has a condition where he has difficulty communicating, and he's still a very, gifted mechanic, and he's a very good person, and it's just tough because Neeson's character and him, they've just been having a hard time making money and making ends meet. But this is their chance. They team up with Lawrence Fishburne, who is this kind of this guy whose name is literally Goldenrod, which is probably my favorite name in this movie, to go on this perilous journey to deliver these wellheads. They'll also make some money for their trouble. Amber Midthunder's character joins them as a native Canadian. We've seen her in stuff like Legion and Roswell and stuff like that. I'm a fan of Amber Midthunder. I think she's very good. But yeah, so she joins them as well. We have these 3 trucks. They got to get to this destination. Problems ensue. It's a big dumb movie, very 90s. I'll say that I had an okay time with it. I was as like a Netflix lazy watch at home on a Saturday night. I didn't have a ton of complaints. I mean, sure, I could poke holes in it all day. I could, kind of point to the absurdities of this movie and how I don't care about almost any character at all. But, it's one way to pass the time. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too far from where you are, except I do think the central brother relationship is generally, at times, kind of affecting. Like, never, like, emotionally devastating, but I mean, I think Liam Neeson is putting effort into those scenes in a way that like a lesser actor would just make them kind of throw away or whatever. I think in this movie, he is kind of selling the intensity of the scenes in a way that at times I'm kind of like, you don't have to go this hard on this. It's just ice road. You can kind of reel it back a little, but yeah, I think it's a totally fine Sunday morning, afternoon Netflix watch, like you said. Definitely an old-fashioned lark in terms of its approach, but at the same time, I think it is somewhat deliberately trying to harken back to like the Wages of Fear or like Sorcerer in terms of like having kind of those like stakes among the truckers and like having some sort of like intensity in terms of like the central premise being like they're literally on thin ice, as you said, from the tagline, and trying to get to this very perilous destination in time. But I did find that the middle of the film, like I think it kind of over tries to like establish more stakes to the point where it's like I feel like the central concept could have justified it enough. Like there's already enough stakes there that I feel like all the extra stuff with Benjamin Walker, Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter himself, I found that to be kind of like a little redundant. Like it just kind of felt like it was just adding to stuff where I felt like the central concept was already pretty intriguing enough. But other than that, I mean, yeah, it's, totally one I'm going to forget pretty soon, much like The Marksman. But yeah, I mean, for a late period Liam Neeson action thriller kind of thing, it's
pretty standard.
Yeah,
it's funny to me because on the one hand, I like how in this movie, like the villains are just villains, It's not getting pretentious. It's not trying to create this big sub narrative and a bunch of hand wringing sympathy. No, they're just super evil, evil to the point where you're just reveling and then hopefully getting brought down.
Yeah, I really appreciate this as a throwback to like people in suits being the smarmy bad guys having no respect for the common lowman who's just trying to do a good job in the truck. It's just like you said, totally unpretentious in a way that I did also respect.
Yeah, I think where this movie bugs me probably is that I just did not care about the miners, which I feel bad to say. We keep cutting to them, and you have to do it, right? Because you have to build the stakes that way. You have to be like, okay, we got to save these guys. But like, there's just no personality to these characters. Like, it's not like there's a lot of personality to some of the other characters, but a lot of it is just Holt McElhaney just being like, trudging along, trying to keep the gang together, but this is not his best effort, I don't think. And there was just nothing. It's missing moments of like just drama, of like characters talking about their histories, characters, bonding, and us being like, man, I hope this guy makes it through, any of that stuff. It's always just plot. And like that's where it kind of like lets me down. They do a little bit of that stuff with like Amber Midthunder's character. You get a sense of why she's doing this and like the urgency of it. And of course, you already mentioned Neeson and Thomas's like brotherly relationships. Like that's where the stakes for me are. So when we cut over to the miners, I'm like, these guys again. It's I feel bad for saying it because I don't want anything bad to happen to them, sure, but like
they seem like
the story doesn't really sell it.
Yeah. I'm totally there with you in that, like, I kind of forgot half the time that the miners were there. I was like, oh, yeah, the miners. We got to get these miners. But then, like, they go back to, like, the trucks and the rigs and be like, oh, yeah, you got to stop this guy. But then, they'd go back to the miners, like, the miners. But
it's like, you got to stop. You got to make some money so you can buy your rig. Oh, yeah, and save the miners, too, I guess. Yeah. That's important.
Yeah, like even like in the last like 10 minutes, I'm like, oh geez, yeah, I guess like what else is there to do? And I was like, the miners. Like we gotta get these miners.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, but I kind of wish the narrative, like I said, was a little bit more streamlined. Like I said, I just found the like kind of Benjamin Walker stuff to be a bit redundant when there's already should be enough established stakes with the miners. And like maybe if I don't know how this could work if like somehow there was like some like phone connection, they could like Liam Neeson could like connect to the miners or something, being like, oh, do you have a wife? I have a wife. Tell me about your wife and stuff like that. And like, it could have had like some like kind of heart to heart, maybe like get a better understanding of who these miners are. But it just kind of felt like the minor narrative got underplayed too much to the point where it kind of cut the dramatic stakes at least in half.
Yeah. I mean, things I liked about this movie ish. I like the soundtrack. I like that they kind of just go for like the Americana of it all, and that it's like, I don't know. We've seen so many movies like it's 2021. We've seen a lot of movies that are very like pop and hip hop and all this stuff. I'm okay with a movie once in a while. It's or as often as we can get that is sort of just going for a different mood, like a different atmosphere, different set of priorities. Yeah. That's kind of just tackling the middle class. Let's go. I'm into it. Like I like those kinds of movies, and I'm glad that it's, I'm glad this demographic is getting, something that, as utterly nonsensical as it is, just kind of like telling a different kind of story in that sense,
Yeah. I mean, that is something though I kind of appreciate in that like it's sort of like half of the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing. The other half being, I guess, like The Rock, like how like they have to always establish that The Rock is like the size of a building in his movies, and like similar to like Arnold Schwarzenegger, they always have to establish like why he's Austrian, or in this movie like why Liam Neeson is Irish, in a way that I always find kind of amusing. And sometimes they just don't acknowledge it at all. Just like, I'm just your average Ohioan citizen, in a way that I kind of admire. But I guess that kind of adds to the heightened absurdities of his type films too, in a way that I really appreciate with like the Arnold movies.
In this movie, though, I mean, he's a bit of a drifter, right? So it's not super noticeable, I guess. It's like you could sort of buy that he's from anywhere. He's just trying to find a buck.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, he's just trying to get by. But I don't know. I just always find that aspect of it kind of amusing, where all these Liam Neeson movies kind of have to like write their way around figuring out like why is Liam Neeson in Middle America just hanging out, trying to get by. This guy,
he seems like someone who works for the CIA. Why is he driving a truck?
Oh yeah, I forgot he was in MIB International.
That's right. Yeah,
yeah,
I did too. But yeah, I think what I probably love about this movie is how it never sticks to its own rules too. Because like so much of this movie is like, we're on a time limit, okay? Every second counts. There is so much stalling and like the plot just stops. And I'm just like, oh, well, they'll never make it. Like, well, I guess the mission's over. And they're like, we still got time. And I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Also, there's this whole thing where they're just like, you can't go too slow or else the truck will fall into the water. Many times they just stop. I'm like, it doesn't happen. And you're like, wait, you made this rule. You told me this would happen. So why didn't it happen? So it was stuff like that where I'm just like, okay, we're all here to just have some fun.
Yeah, I like that there's obviously when they get on the ice, they're like, we have to establish this is very perilous ice. If anything goes wrong, we're screwed. But then they're just like, oh, this part of the ice is cool. Like, no worries.
Like hopping on it.
Yeah. So like, what's your deal? What do you have for lunch? And it's just like, they just don't even care. It's fun. Yeah.
But you know what? This movie, it does the thing that it needs to do, which is that it has an ice road and people have to drive on it. And that happens. And that's all I have to say about this movie.
Better believe it.
So
yeah,
that's it. Yeah. So I am a very low C+. I can't make too many complaints. It's what you see, what you get. And so I think that it has a nice ending too. I thought it was touching a little bit. So yeah, Ice Road. It's on Netflix.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty much in that vein. I'd probably give it like an affectionate and ironically warm high C, and that I don't think it's very good. I think by most measures it's like a very C grade bargain bin type movie, but I think the sincerity is there in a way that I think was maybe more apparent than something like F9, where I think it is.
I did see somebody call this. Oh, I have to sorry to interrupt, but I did see somebody call this on Twitter the slow and the spurious. Love it.
Yeah, but I mean it's very much like what's on a tin is what you get, like you said. It very much harkening back to older throwaway 90s movies, even to the point where you're kind of waiting for the commercial breaks, but not in a bad way. In the way that I found kind of like refreshing. It scratched the itch I was kind of looking for in this movie, and I don't know how many more of these action movies we're going to get from Liam Neeson. I have to imagine we're at the tail end, because I think the dude's like 70 at this point, but who knows? Maybe he'll be 90 and infirmed and still trying to take bad guys down. But
well, look, he's 69. Yeah. He just turned 69, so
yeah,
we have another year. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is close to his swan song. I guess it's not the worst way to go out in this genre. It's a big old fine, I guess, but in a way that I almost kind of admire.
Yeah, maybe, he has a son who's an actor, not like a prominent actor quite yet. I think he was in Vox Lux. What's his name? Kyle Richardson.
Okay.
Yeah, so, maybe he'll be taking the baton. Maybe we'll get a Nice Road 2, Gertie's Revenge.
What if it's like another Taken type movie, but it's about trying to get his son to be a famous star? It's like the opposite, where he's like trying to push his son into like the limelight, like, come on, he's talented, he can sing, he can dance, do your thing.
Well, I think too, like he got his son in some of his movies. I think he was also in Cold Pursuit and Made in Italy, but like, I don't know, like the fact that he was in Vox Lux and
I don't even know what Made in Italy is.
Oh, that came out last year. That was that movie literally no one saw. And I think his son was like one of the main characters, but it was the James Darcy film.
Sure.
His first one.
You say so.
He plays, so you remember that guy? He plays Jarvis in Agent Carter.
Okay.
And
I didn't watch
you probably
it,
didn't see that.
Sure.
Okay. But you remember in Avengers Endgame, there was a character named Jarvis who inspires the Jarvis in the Iron Man movies, and like Tony Stark's dad like calls him Jarvis. That's James Darcy.
That guy. He is he in Downton Abbey?
I've never seen Downton Abbey. I know he's in Broadchurch. That's one of his big ones, and he was also in Dunkirk. Remember that?
Yeah, he always looks like he's like sneaky, even when he's not sneaky, like he's up to something.
I don't know.
Sure.
I'm not going to impugn the man. But yeah, he directed a movie called Made in Italy last year. We never talked about it. I didn't see it. But yeah, Neeson and his son are like the two main characters in that. So there you go, man. He's coming. Right. He's coming up.
Yeah, Liam Neeson Jr. Good for him.
Yeah, he has a name. All right. So that's a C+ for me, C for you. Ice Road is now on Netflix. It is 108 minutes long. They could have cut off like 20 minutes probably.
Oh, yeah. Or just focus more on the minors.
Yeah. Give some of those extra like 18 minutes to the minors.
Don't they have a family or something? Just tell me about the miners.
Well, they do. Okay, so spoilers for the Ice Road. I'm not going to give like an explicit spoiler, but I'm going to kind of spoil something. But like they reveal that, right? Where they're like, one of the characters is related to another character. And I felt nothing. I
honestly just kept forgetting. It's just like, yeah, she is really intense. Like, oh yeah, her brother's a miner. We got to get these miners.
And I was just like, well, you didn't have to say that as a reveal. You could have just like show like a part where he has maybe like a locket or something. That's my sister, like something where you're just like, man, they got to get these miners.
Did you know my sister drives on ice? Oh, that's cool.
When we were growing up, she blah blah blah. Like, do something. You know what I'm saying? Like, build it out. Okay, that's enough of the Ice Road.
All right.
And that's enough for our show. Cinemaholics will be back next week to talk about, oh gosh, what's coming out? Forever Purge, right? Zola, a couple things.
Yeah, there's Tomorrow War.
I'm supposed to be seeing that tomorrow, hopefully.
Yeah, I think I get a screener for that pretty soon. There's America the Motion Picture on Netflix.
Yep.
Boss Baby 2, back in business.
Back in business.
Yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah. And I gotta say though, I'm supposed to get a Black Widow screening this week. That's not going to be for a couple more weeks. So I don't know how much I'm probably going to be watching Black Widow over and over again. So if it's good.
Oh, you're getting,
I hope it's good.
Like an actual screener.
Yeah, I don't, as far as I understand, there's not really any screenings yet at all out here, but yeah, hopefully be able to check that out. But that's what we have in store for you next week. And in terms of Black Widow, the next couple of weeks, we'll see. But as always, connect with us on our social media. All that stuff is in the show notes. Thank you, as always, for listening. From the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
And from Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.